We're joined today by Caitlin Kelly and Neel Shah. They are the co-founders of EZ Newswire. Caitlin and Neel, welcome.
Hi, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for coming on. So for viewers, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We have a little bit of a different format today. On the channel today, we are debuting our new partner chat format. When I see a company that I think would be a good partner to bring on to you guys a little bit outside of our typical show, I'll select them. They'll come on. We'll talk a little bit about the industry and we'll talk about their product. And that's what we're going to do today. So let me kind of explain why I thought this was an important discussion for us to have. We've heard so much about generative AI theory, where this is going to go, how this might be applicable in certain industries. You know, is it going to upend work as we know it? But very few companies are actually applying this in products today, except for like the general use chatbots like ChatGPT, and then maybe a little bit in enterprise. But what if you baked it into a new product and actually build something completely new with generative AI at the core? That's what these two have done. So let's just start with a question for both of you, which is, you know, what do you think the general application of generative AI is going to be? Like, are we all just going to be like living in chatbots, or is this going to be something deeper that people aren't quite expecting yet?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. Look, I think generative AI and large language models are going to make a lot of tasks easier and more productive. I think it's going to increase the pace at which development will happen. I don't think it's a solve and a panacea for all problems. It's really the application of the large language model and how it's trained that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, and Alex, one of the things that we talk about a lot here, specifically in industries like communications, which we'll get into a little bit, that haven't seen a ton of innovation, we think there's a ton of upside. And it behooves the companies that are building these products to make the experience really seamless, really easy to use, and really beautiful, so it feels like a natural extension of your workflow, not living inside of a chatbot.
Yeah, so Caitlin, you come from the comms function. So it does seem like this is going to be, you know, one of the places where we start to see this, you know, quicker than ever before. So just kind of talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how this might, I mean, I'll just say as a journalist, like, we get a lot of pitches. So like, are people going to be able to like stand out pitching this way, or is it going to be a completely different use case that people aren't anticipating?
So my first reaction to that question is that I don't think that a pitch necessarily is going to be able to stand out amongst a sea of good pitches. That's not going to be the outcome. But what I'm excited about in terms of outcomes is up-leveling skills and capabilities and competencies for the average practitioner. And so what you can do as an agency or as inside of an organization, instead of a comms organization at any company, you can really perform so much better, so much more efficiently than you would have been able to do before.
Neel, why don't you take us through your journey seeing something like this and going from, oh, that's pretty cool, to like, oh, that might be something that underlies different companies?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you an example, but prior to launching EZ Newswire, I spent 15 years in private equity and as an investor at a hedge fund. And I think it probably took me a good 10 years to develop the skill set of really being like an Excel junkie. I was very proud of how quickly I could build a model, how accurate it was, all the very complicated functions and formula that I knew. Now you can plug something into OpenAI and you can develop a model in minutes. So that's taking probably something like 10 years of work and being able to replicate it in maybe not the perfect capacity, but you can get pretty darn close in fraction of the time. It means that if you're evaluating a deal, it's going to be far easier for you to evaluate it with less resources. It certainly levels the playing field from a second, third year analyst who might not have the same experience if someone's been doing it for 10 years, to be able to at least look at prospective opportunities in a more constructive way. So the way I look at it really is we kind of lived in a world of screwdrivers, and now someone shows up with a power drill. But it's the application that really does matter, right? Because in some instances, if you're hanging a picture on a wall, you don't need a power drill. You end up putting a hole in the wall. But if you know how to harness that power drill effectively, you're going to get to the right answer faster.
Right. And so speaking of which, like and the press release seems like a proper place to start. And there's obviously a whole ecosystem that's built around it, which is actually kind of garbage that we're going to talk about. And maybe that's the thing that you guys are trying to fix. I won't give it away for you, but you know, how does this end up? What role does the press release play for companies? And then how could generative AI actually help improve what we're seeing today in the market?
Yeah, so the way we think about a press release is that it's not necessarily a document that we are meant to flip into an email and inundate journalist inboxes with. What the press release really is a document of record for any organization to put a stake in the ground about their own momentum. It can be used as an internal motivating tool just as much as it can be for an external or for a journalist-facing pitch. So we're really excited about enabling more companies to talk about their momentum in a way that's standardized and formalized in this sort of format or structure. In terms of what we're doing with this product, in terms of producing these press releases, is creating a better experience around it. Historically, this has been one of lots of different editors, lots of different people involved, lots of 3 a.m. nights sort of cramming out this content. And what we see this could potentially be is something that's much more streamlined, much more easy to use, and something that can really elevate your brand.
Yeah, the use of large language models and AI in our product is only really, it's like a hook. You know, we're by using it in the way that we're making the press release more accessible. More companies, smaller companies especially, ones that don't have thousands of dollars to throw at PR, to copywriters, et cetera, can now create this professional content in seconds. And for many, it's just a starting point. We give them a really well thought out foundation, and they make edits to it and personalize it as they want to. But it's certainly leveling the playing field in an industry where the cost and the barriers to entry have been quite high.
Right. So there's what I'm hearing is there's 2 sides of your business. Like one is the drafting of this document, the press release, but then there's a whole other side of where do you publish it. So maybe this is a good moment to dive into either the product or to talk a little bit more about how you're going to challenge the existing power structures that exist in this industry.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak a little bit to the products because as a practitioner, I've been using these products for over a decade. And what I found is that the experience is clunky. It's largely reliant on legacy distribution lists that are lacking any semblance of transparency. And so our mission from day one was to make the process easy and simple and clear, right? Transparent. And so that's what we're doing with the UI. Our promise to customers is not only can you create a press release in a matter of seconds, you can also distribute it to the publications that are most meaningful to your business. And that, quite frankly, is a game changer.
Yeah, I want to get back to some of the things that you mentioned here, but maybe this is a good opportunity for us to actually take a look at the product.
Yeah, sure. I can. I'll share my screen and quickly give a little video demo of an example that we put together earlier today. This is an example that's based on Alex's new product launch for this new video series. So it's pretty straightforward. You add your media contact information. This is the person who you would want a journalist to contact or any sort of external party to contact if they wanted to write or learn more about your news. You add in a couple of sentences here. We've drafted this for Alex and pop it into our UI. We make this super easy to use. We give you some pointers on what constitutes a good prompt, because obviously the better information you input, the better the outcome will be. And then you hit create. It takes a couple of seconds. Neel, do you want to speak to the prompt?
Yeah, look, the power of the large language models is really their generality. And However, for highly technical applications like writing a press release, you really need to train that model and ask the right questions, and provide key inputs necessary so you don't have what's known as hallucinations in the output or things that are made up and so forth. So what we've done is really codified our operational experience. We have decades of operational experience in writing press releases and communications, and translated that into a process and a engineering exercise to really leverage large language models in the best way, so that the content that is created is professional, it's accurate, and it's free of any unwanted improvisations.
So what we just ran through with that demo while he was talking was we created the press release. The AI piece of it, the actual engineering of the press release took a matter of seconds. We have it in a very traditional text editor box, so you can go in there and add your headshots and add quotes, add links, make it fancy and presentable to everyone, and then you publish it. So we created our wire is called EZ Newswire. Our first media partnership was with the Associated Press. They, as you know, are doing really interesting things with OpenAI, and I think that they'll be open and willing to partner with other technology companies. And now we're working with publishers across the country to help distribute business announcements that are relevant to their community's news. So that means that a publisher in Charleston, South Carolina, for instance, is now going to run business announcements and press releases from EZ Newswire that are relevant to their audience. And we're really excited about that.
Yeah, I was trying to
go ahead.
I'm trying to go back to the video, but to show how the process is very quick, right? There was a point in the process where the user gets to decide where they want it to be published, and we've also demystified that process for PR. The existing providers, their checkout process or their selection process is really meant for practitioners and is littered with, it's a Chinese menu littered with options. It's not transparent on pricing, it's not transparent on placement and so forth. By partnering with publications and guaranteeing placement, we've given that power back to the consumer to let them create their own shopping cart and decide exactly where they want their news to be placed.
Yeah, there's so many sides of this. There's the creation, there's the selection, and there's the actual publication and payment. So let's talk a little bit about creation, about what it would be like to, build a press release in here. So I watched that video as it went on. That was pretty accurate in terms of what I was doing. I mean, at a glance, but it looked like legitimately like big technology. It does newsletter and podcasts and starting this new partner program. That was like a very good press release. So Caitlin, just talk about it from like the eye of a practitioner here. You said many sleepless nights and lots of sweat that went into, I guess, putting together the press release and then sending it out. So talk a little bit about how this generative AI can actually change the way that practitioners make this happen.
It's huge. I mean, for me as a practitioner, I've been doing this for years and years. I started off early in my career and I would be responsible for that first draft, right? And then it would go up sort of the totem pole and it would touch every single person on that hierarchy all the way up to the CEO. So if you add that up, the accretive, time spent on that one document is actually massive. And that equates to a lot of dollars spent for any given company. And so what we're so excited about is not just the fact that our technology is enabling companies like the ones I've worked for before to have a bigger, faster head start to get this content created and published, but also that we're enabling a whole category of companies that have never, ever known that this was possible for them. That's so exciting to me to be able to talk and work with the small to medium-sized businesses that we're talking to every single day to demystify, as Neel said, this process, which they've never felt like they had access to.
Yeah. So what does it take to be a newswire? Like the competitors that you're going against are like PR newswire. So by the way, like as a reporter in my inbox, when I get a press release, like people will be like, here's our news. You can go to PR newswire to see the press release. And like, one of the things I always wonder was like, well, how did they become a newswire? Like, do they just need a website? Like, what does it take to become a wire?
Well, the wire actually dates back to
Maybe 1846.
prehistoric times.
Mm.
It's a Jurassic era practically, but it was really the foundation of the wire was really laying the telegraph cable between New York and London, and that was the genesis of creating the transfer of that news content and making it more efficient.
And it's actually incredibly interesting because the Associated Press, in fact, was one of those first companies to help distribute that news from Europe and the rest of the world. Now, today, what that means is that we have an RSS feed that feeds directly into the CMSs of many of these publishers. And that's how that information is transmitted.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so you don't need to build that like transcontinental wire to do what you're doing.
Right.
But the ones that are incumbent right now, they seem to have sort of taken advantage of a bit of a competition, a position that sort of insulates themselves from competition, and maybe acted as if you need to build a wire legitimately to challenge them, right?
Well, distribution is an incredibly hard thing to build.
Right.
So I'm not trying to undermine the
Mhm.
complexity and the work that those companies have dedicated to building that network. But like with all industries, AI and technology is changing how things are done. And we hope that we will have a better way of attacking some of those distribution endpoints, as they call them in the business, to get our customers in the hands of the media companies that matter to them a little bit faster.
Yeah. So what's your pitch when you go to these media companies and say, "Hey, why don't you work with us?" I mean, I'd imagine it's kind of a tougher pitch because having worked inside some newsrooms, like in media
Yeah.
companies, they're like fairly slow and like they tend to really drag their feet on innovation. And you're coming to them saying, "Hey, not only are we building, a new newswire, but we're going to use AI in the creation process." What are those conversations like?
I
Well,
would,
Good. Well, look, the conversation with publishers are actually relatively straightforward. We provide them three things: revenue, content, and advertising leads. So they like us. We give them three things. We also do all the heavy lifting. We have a great technical team. We work closely with the publishers to make sure that the integration on the technology side is seamless. On the topic of AI, we make it pretty clear that, look, this is, and to be transparent, about half of our users leverage our AI writing wizard. The other
That's a
half
lot.
have right. The other half have their own content ready to go, and they really just want better and more transparent distribution. But we make it clear to our customers and to publishers that this content is really a draft, and the customer can modify it, personalize it in any way they want. And we also have on top of that, Alex, we have a lot of filters in place to check for the brand safety of a piece of content, to make sure that it fits the narrative or fits the voice of a publication and so forth.
and just in terms of the appetite of the publishers, I think that things are changing so rapidly that even 2 years ago, when you worked inside of some of these larger newsrooms, there is a bigger appetite and more fluency around some of these technologies than ever before. Folks are willing to give things a shot. It's just a matter of how much lift does it take from their side. So when we come to the table and offer to do a lot of that heavy lifting, it's a much easier way to get to a yes.
That's cool. And so what is like a pricing comparison? Like, let's say I wanted to put a press release on one of your competitors. I mean, you did show in the video at checkout screen that seemed, far more affordable than other options that I've heard about.
Yeah, so we are more affordable than many of the players on the market today. We're also more transparent about our pricing. One of the things that I encountered as a practitioner was that there's not a lot of upfront communication around how much things cost, and that's a problem. I can tell you anecdotally that I've been hit with an invoice in the thousands of dollars for very early stage companies that do not have the funds to support an expense like that. And so
After the fact, that's coming after you.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
So there's an
Okay.
AP process with many of the legacy services. And that's worked for them, and that's fine. But for earlier stage companies, for smaller companies that don't have processes or funds, bank account sizes like that, it's really an issue. And so we've been very committed from day one to make sure that the price point is one that is palatable for the majority of companies. This is not a 1% product. We are a product for the others, right? For the 99%. And we've been really committed to that. And we have that conversation with publishers on day one to make sure that they understand who they're serving. They are serving the small businesses that are operating in their market, and they understand that and want to work with us because a healthier business ecosystem in their market benefits them long term.
Totally. So what would a price look like for you guys?
It starts as low as $25. We actually don't charge for writing the content. The AI writing wizard is complimentary. You only pay really for the endpoints that you want guaranteed placement in. So those endpoints, we work together with the publishers to develop pricing that makes sense. But on average, Alex, we're 90% cheaper than the incumbents.
So when a press release from EZ Newswire goes to a publisher, does it go to like a certain section? Is it like a release section? And let's say it goes to the AP, for instance. Where does that get distributed on the AP Newswire? Where do I find them?
It does. So we have a direct partnership with the AP. That was actually the first partnership that we did. And so does some of the legacy players. But the AP has a specific section on their site for press releases, and it's segmented by their partners that they work with, including EZ Newswire. So if you go to their site, you'll see it. In addition to that, we work with the AP to distribute it. Now, it's not guaranteed, but often, the average pickup is around 5 to 6 links, with about 3,000 member newsrooms that subscribe to the AP's feed across the country. And that's everyone from like the New York Times down to a local publication to a college newspaper. That's
cool. So how long have you been in market for?
We came out of beta and launched about 2 months ago, and we've been working. Yeah, we launched our alpha in August of last year. We've been working on this now for about 3.5 years.
I'm just curious what the feedback has been from clients who've used the generative stuff. What are they telling you?
So far, 80% of our clients, when we ask them, we have a feedback survey that we ask the customers to fill out. 75 to 80% have rated our content creation a 5 out of 5, which means that there's minimal or no changes. But we're making changes to our models, our parameters every single day. So we hope to get that number closer to 90%, but you're right, it's a pretty good number.
Yeah, well, what models are you building on? Like, are you building on OpenAI models, or
we use
how does this work?
We do use GPT-4, which is an OpenAI product, and there's been a couple of new releases from some of the competitors out there that we're also involving into our tech stack. It really depends on the use case, and that's a great thing, is that we can really leverage off the tens of billions of dollars invested in AI over the past decade in order to really fine tune and make our content better. But for any single for any single release, we're typically calling our models about 20 to 25 times. It's very different than if you just took that same piece of content, that input, and went to, for example, ChatGPT, which is more of a one-shot model, and got really one output. We're really iterating behind the scenes so that the quality of that content is professional, and like I mentioned before, there are very few hallucinations.
I want to ask both of you. You come at this from very interesting backgrounds. I mean, Caitlin, being a practitioner, to decide to go to build a tech company. Talk a little bit about your journey there.
Oh, well, I frequently tell people that if I would have known how hard it was before I started, I never would have done it. But no, I mean, I talk to folks about this a lot. It's the hardest and most gratifying thing I've ever done. But I do think that having this practitioner, this like firsthand operational experience, has made all the difference. We've lived in the shoes of folks trying to create a narrative, trying to explain and express and pitch that narrative to media and journalists. And so it's incredibly powerful in terms of how that manifests in the product experience. And it's certainly made a difference to the experience of our end customers.
Yeah, Neil, look, when I speak with investors, they always say, I got a good life. You know, they get to evaluate different companies and investment opportunities, and they get to chill. So what made you trade that in for the entrepreneur lifestyle?
Yeah, well, I actually started my first software company when I was pretty young, and I exited it when I was a sophomore in college, and I was a Wharton undergrad, so I kind of got sucked into that the high finance vortex. So really that 15-year journey in finance was my sabbatical, and then I returned, I would say, back to being an entrepreneur. It's like the world of being an entrepreneur in the world of startups is an incredibly difficult path. So you have to somewhat be a glutton for punishment and like the daily grind that comes with it.
Yeah, oh, I hear you on that 100%. Did I miss anything, or is there anything else that viewers should think about when they are considering this or thinking about this story?
No, the only thing, and I think this is more of a question for you, or just like to turn the interview, reverse it.
Here we
But
go, flipping it.
there is sort of there is a lot of questions or a lot of conversation around journalism and AI and how AI is sort of impacting and influencing journalism. And one of the things that we didn't talk a lot about during this call was that the content that we're creating and publishing in media companies at, the AP, for instance, or any of the other media companies that we work with, is clearly marked as sponsored content. It is paid content. Just as this conversation is paid with you, we are paying these publishers to run this content, and it's marked as such. And so we do get a lot of questions around the distinction between editorial and paid and how that line might be blurring. And so there's not much, I don't really have a point or a question, but it is it's something that people are talking about a lot. And I just sort of wanted to open up the conversation that none of this technology, none of this content is ever going to replace the work of well-researched journalism.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%.
None of it's going to replace your work.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's good news.
No, I just think it's an important thing to mention or just keep mind of as especially we think about it every day. But in terms of how we work with publishers, it's always on a commercial basis. It's always a revenue conversation. And then if there's upside in an editorial perspective, that's great for the brand.
Definitely. And yeah, some people have said that the best ads are content. And if you're what I like about your targeting system is you're giving the person who's putting the release out some level of control to be able to find publications that fit. And that is a real service, because oftentimes they'll just show up in places that they don't belong. And when those can get better targeted, it works for everybody, the company doing the release and the publisher and the reader.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, we really enjoyed it. This has been really fun. As we've all said, this is a shakedown business, and we're trying to be anti-shakedown, as one smart person said to me before. So thank you for having us in this conversation. We're excited to talk to anybody who wants to continue the conversation about it, and we'll see how it goes.
And thanks for being here. I really appreciate you helping me pilot this new series. Couldn't think of a better company to do it, especially this is pretty newsworthy stuff. Very cool. So just shout out the URL or the way to get in touch with you before we go. I'll put it in the show notes, but for those that are watching right now, what should they do?
Yeah.
It's EZ, so letters EZ Newswire.com. That's our URL. And you can reach me at ns@eznewswire.com and ck@eznewswire.com or hello@eznewswire.com, and they'll get to us.
Amazing. Well, Caitlin, Neel, thank you so much for coming on, for opening my eyes and our viewers' eyes to a really interesting new area and finally a practical application of generative AI. We're here and we're just getting started. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.